He was 35 years old, a Carmelite friar in 16th century Spain, and he had been dragged from his bed by members of his own religious order and locked in a cell the size of a large wardrobe. The cell had no window. The only light came from a crack in the wall, and only at noon, when the sun aligned just right. In those few minutes of light each day, he read, he prayed, he composed poetry in his head and held it there until he could write it down. He was beaten on a regular rotation, given scraps of food. The other friars ate at the table above him and dropped fish bones through a hole in the floor. This was not his enemy's cruelty. This was his own community's correction. He stayed in that cell for 9 months. He did not become bitter. He became luminous. This is a summary of the Ascent of Mount Carmel by St. John of the Cross, a book written in the 1580s by a Spanish mystic who learned from the inside out that the most direct path to God runs straight through complete emptiness. If you have ever felt that doing everything right spiritually still left you hollow inside, this book may change the way you understand why. If this kind of content speaks to you, subscribing takes one tap and brings you a new summary every week. There is a specific problem this book addresses, not the problem of not believing hard enough, or not praying long enough, or not being good enough. Those are surface problems. John of the Cross is working on something deeper. The problem is that we keep filling ourselves with things we hope will carry us toward God, and those very things are blocking the door. Religious consolations, spiritual feelings, vivid interior impressions, the warmth you feel at the altar, the peace that settles in after a long meditation. These are not bad things, but if you cling to them, if you start chasing them, managing them, protecting them, you have traded the living God for a feeling about God. And John spent his life helping people tell the difference. The book moves in 3 phases. First, emptying the sensory self. Second, emptying the rational mind through faith. Third, emptying the memory and will through hope and love. Together, these form what John calls the active night of the soul, the part the person must do before God can do what only God can do. Here is where the teaching becomes vivid, because John does not just name the problem, he draws it. He made an actual sketch, a small mountain with 3 paths leading up from the base. 2 paths, one labeled pleasures of earth and one labeled pleasures of heaven, curve off to the sides and stop before reaching the summit. They go nowhere. Only the middle path, marked simply Mount Carmel, climbs all the way to the top. And along that narrow path, he wrote the same word over and over in Spanish. Nada, 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 nada. Nothing, 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 nothing. At the summit, where you might expect to find everything, he wrote again, nada. Above it, a small note. Here on this mount, there dwells only the honor and glory of God. This is the book's central teaching, stated as bluntly as a diagram allows. The path to union with God is not accumulation. It is the willingness to release everything that is not God, and to keep releasing all the way to the end. Not once, in a dramatic conversion, continuously. In ordinary days, in small desires, in the habitual reaching for comfort and confirmation. John describes this discipline as something that will feel, to the person practicing it, like loss. That is the point. The loss is the practice. This is why the path is narrow, and most people, even religious people, even people who love God sincerely, take one of the 2 side paths instead. But here is what makes John more than a philosopher of emptiness. He is not asking for blankness. He is making a precise claim about how transformation works. Think about light and shadow. You cannot fill a room with both simultaneously. The more light enters, the less shadow remains, not because shadow is evil, but because they cannot occupy the same space. John says the same relationship holds between the soul and God. God is infinite light. Attachment to creatures, people, pleasures, achievements, even spiritual experiences, is shadow. Not because those things are wicked, because they are finite. And what is finite cannot hold both itself and the infinite at the same time. He quotes Augustine directly, and the rawness still lands across 4 centuries. Thou art light, I am blind. Thou, life, I, death. Thou, medicine, I, sick. Thou, supreme truth, I, utter vanity. The practical instruction is quiet but serious. Audit your desires, not just your sins. The next time you finish a good period of prayer and immediately want more of it, or feel peace settle in and start trying to hold on to it, notice that reaching. That noticing is already the beginning of what John is teaching. Now, the book's most famous passage. It can sound like severity the first time you hear it, but listen through to what it is actually offering. In order to arrive at having pleasure in everything, desire to have pleasure in nothing. In order to arrive at possessing everything, desire to possess nothing. In order to arrive at being everything, desire to be nothing. In order to arrive at knowing everything, desire to know nothing. This is not a call to numbness. John lived a richly affectionate life. He wrote some of the most tender poetry in any language, lines about the soul seeking God the way a lover searches for a beloved in the dark. He laughed easily. He walked in the hills near Granada and made his students walk with him. He was not empty the way a stone is empty. He was empty the way a clear glass is empty, because it is emptiness that allows something to fill it completely. He uses the image of a log of wood and fire. Throw green wood onto a flame and it resists. It hisses. It smolders without transforming. But let the log dry completely, all moisture and resistance stripped away. And the fire does not merely heat the wood becomes fire. It glows. It gives light. The soul that attains to this state, John writes, has no longer any ways or methods. It simply is what it has been united to. That is the destination. Not a soul that has achieved peace, but a soul so transparent to God that its movements are God's movements. John also goes deep into the second night, the emptying of the mind itself through faith. And what he says here may be the least comfortable part of the book for modern readers. He writes that faith, by its nature, is darkness to the intellect. Not because faith is irrational, but because God exceeds every category the human mind can form. You cannot build a mental image of God and call it God. You cannot hold God as a concept in your understanding and believe that God is present there. The intellect that insists on grasping, naming, and defining will always be working with something less than what it is reaching for. His instruction is to travel like a blind man, holding onto faith as a guide rather than a torch. Not seeing, trusting, moving forward without the reassurance of knowing exactly where you are. This is hard. It feels like being lost. And John says, yes, that is what it is supposed to feel like, because the goal lies beyond anything the mind can map in advance. He uses a striking comparison. A man born blind, if you describe yellow to him, will understand the word, but he will have no real idea of the color. The description remains exterior to him. He can repeat it, study it, even teach it. But the thing itself is unreachable by that path. God is the same to the intellect trying to grasp divinity through concepts. You can describe, analyze, and theologize, and remain at the door. Faith that accepts its own blindness gets further than intelligence that refuses to lower its torch. He also writes with unusual sharpness about how sincere seekers go wrong, not from vice, but from overdependence on spiritual experience. He describes people in early prayer who receive genuine consolations, warmth, tears, a felt sense of presence. Then they make the mistake of treating those feelings as the goal. They measure their prayer by how moved they were. On dry days, they assume God has left. They confess more, add methods, interrogate their hearts for what went wrong. The dryness deepens. Their spiritual director, who does not recognize what is happening, agrees with the diagnosis of failure. More effort, less fruit. John calls them spiritual gluttons. They want the wine, but not the vintner. He warns further. Visions, locutions, consoling impressions in prayer, even if genuine, even if they come from God, do not seek them, do not keep them, do not build your spiritual life around them. The moment you treat a supernatural experience as something to be collected and held, you have reduced the infinite to a possession. The instruction is plain. When something consoling happens in prayer, receive it. Let it pass. Do not reach back. And then there is the passage that sounds like a letter more than a treatise. John is describing souls being drawn by God into deeper silence, where the old methods have gone quiet, the feelings are absent, the meditations have dried up. These people are frightened. They go to their confessor, and the confessor, not understanding what is happening, tells them they must be suffering from low spirits, or from some hidden sin, or from spiritual regression. Under this misdiagnosis, the soul turns back from the very threshold it was approaching. John's frustration is palpable. He has watched it happen too many times. The same God who is drawing this person deeper into the dark is being accused of abandonment. His instruction is direct. If you are in that dry place, if the silence feels like absence, if nothing is working the way it used to, that may not be a problem. That may be precisely what progress looks like from the inside. The dryness is often the door, and so we return to the man in the cell with the crack in the wall. John escaped that Toledo prison after 9 months, lowered himself out a window at night on strips of cloth knotted together, dropped into a dark alley, and was sheltered by Carmelite nuns who hid him in their church. He was gaunt and still. He carried a small notebook of verses written by lamplight and through that narrow daily slant of noon sun. He had not moved closer to God in those 9 months by acquiring anything. He had moved closer by having everything taken from him: the freedom, the community, the daylight, the ordinary rhythms of the religious life. What remained in that nothing was the thing the book is about. He wrote in the prologue, "Only one that passes this way can understand it, and even he cannot describe it." He tried anyway. For the rest of us, still filling ourselves with things we hope will do the work, still chasing the feeling, protecting the consolation, collecting the experience, he left a mountain drawing with one narrow path up the middle, and the word nothing written all the way along it. The question for tonight: what are you still calling spiritual that is really just yours to hold? And what would happen if you opened your hand? If something in this video stayed with you, drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to hear which part. And a like helps more than you know.